This video is about percents and outliers of box and whisker plots. You're going to be able to calculate percentages and identify outliers of box and whisker plots. So just a refresher from the previous lesson, we have percents of box and whisker plots between each data point, between the minimum value and the lower quartile, between the lower quartile and median, between the median and upper quartile, and between the upper quartile and max. There's 25% of the data. And it doesn't matter if it's very close together, if that lower quartile was way over here, so it's really tiny, and then the lower to median is really big. It doesn't matter. It's always 25% every single time. So we're going to look at a few questions regarding the percentages. So the first question says, what percent is between the min and the lower quartile? So I'm going to find the minimum value, I'm going to find the lower quartile, and I'm going to count up the 25% that is in between those two values. So starting at minimum, I'm going to count, and that's just 25%. So the answer is 25%. What percent is between the lower quartile and the max? So I'm going to find the lower quartile, I'm going to find the maximum value, and I'm going to count till I get to the max. So I got 25%, 50%, 75%. And then what percent is greater than the min? So greater means going to the right. So if I find my minimum, I'm going to count to the right. So it's 25, 50, 75, 100%. So 100% of the data is greater than the min. When you are answering questions about percentages regarding box and whisker plots, your only answer options are 0%, 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100%, because you have to count by 25%. So if you were asked a question and there's a multiple choice, and let's say I had a 30% on there, you can automatically cross off that 35% because you have to count by 25s. All right, so let's find the 5-number summary of the data. So we've already done, I did more explanation of how to find the min, the lower quartile, the median, the upper quartile, and the max in the last video. So if you haven't watched that yet and you're not sure what LQ and UQ means, go back and watch that first for more explanation. So remember, our first step is to put this in order from least to greatest, and in this case the numbers are in order from least to greatest, but because this 72 is not on there, I'm just going to throw this on the end here so I don't forget it, because it was over on the second line. Alright, so I'm going to write my minimum and my maximum first because those are nice and easy to see. Our minimum is 23 because that is the smallest number. And our max is 72 because that is the biggest number. So now we're going to find the median. So we're going to cross off till we get to the middle. And that gives us 55. So since there's only one median or one middle number, I'm going to cross it off completely. I'm not going to include it for my lower quartile or my upper quartile. So I'm going to now cross off till the middle of the lower numbers until I get to the middle, which is 48. And same thing with my upper quartile, we're going to have 63. Alright, so interquartile range. I talked about this a little bit in the last video as well. The interquartile range is the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. So using that same set of data from before, I just wrote it again here. Our lower quartile is 48 and our upper quartile is 63. So all I have to do is just subtract those two numbers. So that gives me an IQR of 15. So in order to find the interquartile range, you first have to go through and find your 5-number summary. Alright, so outliers. These are the steps that you are going to follow for outliers. You're going to take your IQR and you're going to multiply it by 1.5. So our IQR we just found out was 15. We're going to multiply that by 1.5, which gives us a number of 22.5. So now we're going to take that number and we're going to subtract it from the lower quartile. So we are going to take 48 and minus 22.5 to get an answer of 25.5. So what this means is any number that is less than 25.5 in our data set is going to be an outlier. So we have the number 23. So 23 is an outlier since it is less than 25. Now we are going to add that number, that 22.5, to our upper quartile. So we're going to take 63, we're going to add 22.5, and that is going to give us an answer of 85.5. So that means any number that is greater than 85.5 in our data set is an outlier. But there are no numbers greater than 85.5 since our max was 72. So there are no outliers on the top end of this data. Okay, so go ahead and stop the video and try these questions and then unpause it when you are done to check your answers. So remember, the first step is to put them in order. So I'm going to write them in order, cross them off as I go. 15, 18, 22, 30, 32, 33, and 37. Okay, so my minimum and my maximum are again the easiest. Go ahead and fill those in. The smallest number is 9 and the biggest number is 37. So median, cross them off till I get to the middle. Since there are two middle numbers, I'm going to add it up and divide by 2, so that gives me 26. Since there are two middle numbers, I'm going to put a line down it, and I'm going to use the 22 to find my lower quartile and the 30 to find my upper quartile. So crossing off in the other direction, I see I have two middle numbers, so I am going to add that up and divide by 2. That gives me 16.5. And my upper quartile, add those up and divide by 2. That gives me 32.5. My interquartile range, my IQR, is just taking the 32.5, the upper quartile, and subtracting the lower quartile, which gives me an answer of 16. So now to find out if there's any outliers, I'm going to take my 16 and multiply it by 1.5, which gives me 24. So 24 is the number I am subtracting from the lower quartile. And that gives me a negative 7.5. So there were no numbers less than negative 7.5, so we don't have any outliers on that end. So now I'm going to take that 24 and I'm going to add it to my upper quartile, which is 56.5. So since my max was 37, there are no numbers bigger than 56.5, so that means there are no outliers whatsoever. Alright, this is the end of the video.